All right, joined here today by Toy Hawkins. She is a current resident of the Douglas neighborhood, or I believe I have that right, but she has been in a few different areas in the Chicagoland area throughout her life. And for a little spell there, went over to LA and got all Hollywood on us and became a TV producer. But she never forgot where she came from. She, still has her roots here in Chicago, and that is what she's here to talk about now. So, hey, Toy, how are you?
I'm great, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So yeah, we can just go ahead and just start right from the beginning. I hear that's a very good place to start, according to some stories out there. So you were born and raised in the Woodlawn area, correct?
I was 63rd in Ellis. And fun fact, I grew up and decided I wanted to go and buy my childhood two flat and renovate it and get all excited about, kind of having those nostalgic memories. And I drove over there and discovered they'd already demolished the building and
Oh,
erected like these beautiful condos. But yeah, 6332 South Ellis, that's where I grew up. Best childhood
all
ever.
right. Yeah. So tell me about that. What was growing up in Woodlawn like?
It was really, really fun. I'm not shy about my age, but I grew up in the 80s in that area. And, it was obviously a different experience than any of what children do nowadays because you actually played outdoors. But my family, we had the respect of the neighborhood. My grandmother, it was her building, a two-story building, and my grandmother had seven children. So me and all my cousins grew up in the same two-story building, all living together.
Mhm.
And so there was probably, I don't know, I think there was 10 of us, grandkids. And so we're all in this building. So it was always lots of fun and fighting and playing and parties. And, I was a little bit of a tomboy. So just being able to be outside doing the hopscotch and jump rope and flipping over like the the poles. And what I mean is like most people didn't really have a full fence in front of their yard. It had
Mm,
probably fallen apart, but the poles remained in the ground
right.
or grass. So we used them for our acrobatic experiences, climbing trees, garages, chalk on the sidewalk. When I say best childhood ever, I mean it. I loved it.
Yeah.
63rd in Ellis extended to, I want to say 65th, if I'm going in the right direction. We all went to Alexander Dumas Elementary School. So that was a really long block. And we would all walk together as kids in a group going to school. And that's something that's unheard of nowadays, like kids going to school walking alone, right? But
Mm,
that's what made it special. We had to have each other's backs. We fought together, like you didn't dare mess with anybody in our family. But we were also able to fight each other because you knew that you could only fight play fight so much without really getting in trouble from your parents or grandparents. So just a different experience. I will share though, there was this one abandoned building or abandoned house on the block. And I want to say this was probably 64th when you right when it's to 64th before the park that's there, I think. And gosh, it's been a long time. I'm going through memory. I should have pulled up a map so I could make sure I'm getting this right. But there was this one abandoned house, and there was this, I guess the term is hobo. Forgive me if I'm saying that wrong, but a homeless guy who hung out there. And he was so scary and creepy. But
mm.
me and my cousins, we would just walk past that building or past this guy, and we would all do silly things like distort our faces or walk really weird because we were trying to like out scare this guy because we were scared. Ineffective, doesn't work, but it just was so funny how, as kids, we were trying to come up with things, when enjoying our neighborhood and just to feel like we were safe when we felt unsafe. But it wasn't really a concern. It's just the mentality of being a child, I guess.
Yeah.
It's good
Nice. Yeah.
times.
When that's all it's like, what even is your paradigm of what's safe or not? I mean, looking back on that
Mm.
now, I guess as an adult looking back on your childhood, were you safe or what would be the kind of like how you grew up there compared to what it is now and what you've seen over the course of time and all that or
I mean, what's funny is I have been to that neighborhood once or twice, and it's such a highly sought after area right now, especially with things
Mhm.
like the Obama Library coming and
Yep.
all of the evolution in the neighborhoods and businesses and all of that. But I would
Golf
say
courses.
exactly. But growing up, it did not have that reputation. It was probably considered more of an unsafe area growing up, but I pretty tough family too. So I think that we didn't walk around with fear or anything. But I would not, like, compared to now, I would not ever recommend anyone do, like, parent or do the things that we were able to do, like sending your kids to walk 2 blocks to school, even in a group, like, that's just a no. And I'm talking, I think we were probably 7, 8 years old. We weren't even
Mm,
preteens. So, I
mhm,
mean, there were preteens among us, but it was still, I think, a different era, a different time. Not that there weren't kidnappings and other things to worry about, but I don't know, it was the time of cracking open the fire hydrant and letting the water spray in the
mhm.
streets and you're playing in the water, right? Now the concern is, water waste and making sure the fire department has enough water to put out fires. So you wouldn't do that anymore. It's just an evolution of time that we just can't get back. But I do think that the area has evolved. Again, I wish that we hadn't lost my grandmother's building. I think that that would be a great asset to have right now in our family. But and it's a nostalgic place and time that me and all 10 of my cousins hold dear. And I think it's made us a lot of who we are growing up in that area. So I think even to get something now in that area, I think for personal reasons, it would be a get. It would be a plus. But yeah, it was definitely a different time.
Yeah. Yeah, personal reasons and potential, financial gains down the line. Like we said,
Oh,
it is
for
a
sure.
fast-growing neighborhood, so, yeah.
For sure, for sure, yeah. Yeah, it was a different
And how
time. I mean,
also
that was sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that was a time when you had all the projects up too, you know what I mean? Like, this was the '80s, so you still had, like, the Cabrini Green, the Ickeys, and even, closer to the lake was really more of a housing for more impoverished or, less fortunate families. That has now been a migration to the south and the suburbs, and so it's become prime real estate being closer to the lake. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir, or the choir director, I should say. But I think that that's an unfortunate change where, people like my grandmother, who wasn't able to keep her house, even with 7 children who grew up to become 7 adults and possibly could have helped to save it. But because I grew up in a family that didn't really ask for help or share some of the challenges they endured, I feel like that was a loss that we could have avoided had we been a more open family and communicated struggles and challenges together. And I say we, but I'm referring to my grandmother and then obviously,
Mhm.
her 7 kids. So when she said, okay, guys, you are 19 now or 21 now, time to get a job. I need you to help out with this mortgage or whatever it is, we would have been able to retain that asset. So it's unfortunate, especially
Right.
for someone like me who grew up to have a mind for real estate and investment and things like that, who would love to get something now, but it would have been pennies on the dollar then versus now. So just all of those things constantly, I'm constantly thinking about, and I guess if I could turn that into an encouragement for anyone who would be listening to me today, it would be, hold on to that family asset. Don't just sell it off.
Mm,
Find a way to keep it. Find ways to renovate it or update it or at least maintain it so it's not just doesn't become dilapidated or deteriorate because down the road it could be advantageous to have it.
yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that story on a personal level as well. Apparently, the house I grew up in was lost. I grew up with my grandparents in Indianapolis, and that house was lost over what apparently was a $3,500 tax bill.
Isn't that
It
crazy?
was
Oh, that's
it was
upsetting.
paid off. The house was paid off and everything. It was a $3,500 tax bill that ended up. And yeah, I grew up like my family, same thing. Like nobody, if there was a problem, you kept it to yourself. Definitely never talked about, money or anything like that. All that kind of stuff. Like pride running high,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So
Oh, that's upsetting. Oh, that's
yeah.
upsetting.
And I just learned that. I just learned that actually a couple like within the last year probably that that's
Oh,
what it was. I thought it was I knew obviously I knew they lost the house, but I thought it was a much like, more difficult situation. And I was like, oh come on. Like, if we
right?
had known, we all definitely could have scrounged together $3,500 if that's
You
what it came down
know,
to. Like,
could have
yeah.
created GoFundMe.
Yeah, seriously. I just get Uber. Like I could have
Right?
Ubered a couple, for a couple weeks and just like,
Absolutely.
hauled ass and just gotten that done. But apparently.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anyone that's dealing with that now, obviously like money has changed. So $3,500 then compared to now is probably even if it was $35,000, like now,
Yeah.
like that's the equivalent. Like figure out how to come up with 35K, save the property especially if it's in the city of Chicago. Like, figure
Yeah.
it out, make it happen. Second city, like it will thrive, it will survive, it will do well. So yeah, please don't have me and Jake's story. Anyone listening, don't experience what we
Yeah. Yeah. Round up everyone
Yeah.
you know. Don't let just don't become a tax sale. Don't become, whatever. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so cool. All right. So Woodlawn, how long were you in Woodlawn?
So my mother, she went off and bought her first house when I was 9.5, about to turn 10. So in my first 10 years I was there, but my grandmother still had the property after we left for probably another 3 years. So I want to say, so that brings us to like the early 90s. I'm an 81 baby. So now we're talking about, 93 maybe. So we did a brief stint in Chatham,
Hmm.
where we went from 63rd and Ellis to 78th and Langley. There used to be a Reggio's Pizza right there on 79th Street. I think that's a Black-owned pizzeria, if I'm not mistaken. Forgive me if I
Still
am
today.
mistaken. Yeah, still today. Not at that location,
Nice.
but they're still in business. They are still in Chatham.
Okay.
They now have a bigger restaurant closer to 87th and Cottage Grove, where the Target used to be. It's now a Discover hub or something for the Discover card, but a bigger sit-in restaurant location there. They used to be on 79th, as I mentioned. My mother had that house there for 2 years with her then fiance, and then she met her husband, and
Hmm.
she basically handed over the keys to that house to her then fiance, and so he continued to live there, and we moved to Jeffrey Manor, from Chatham to Jeffrey Manor when I was 11, and still have that property to this day. So I
Oh wow.
spent, I'd say, like the first 10 years at Woodlawn, then 2 years over there in Chatham, and then the rest of my childhood in Jeffrey Manor.
And
Yeah.
Jeffrey, and all these areas are like pretty striking distance from each other, right?
Yeah, yeah. If we're talking plot
Jeffrey
points, you're
Manor.
you're almost making a triangle, or at least
Yeah.
an L. So yeah, I've bounced around, but they're all south side of Chicago. And my mother, again, she remarried, so she and my dad split when I was very young, like 3 years old. But my dad lived on the west side of Chicago. So while I never claimed residence on the west side, I would frequent the west side of Chicago with my dad. So he lived like, I'm not as well versed on the west side, but he lived like 8 South Mayfield and then someplace else over west.
Hmm.
So I've had some experiences on the west side. I know there's this ongoing argument about which side is the worst side. South siders say the west side, west siders say the south side, north siders say every side but the north
Hmm.
side. But yeah, I've definitely lived all over the South Side for sure.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Is that a competition that anyone wants to win, or is it is it a point of pride to say no, we're the worst, or are you trying to say no, you're the worst?
I I think
What's
I think it's the latter. It's the point of pride is to say, no, you're the worst. Like, we're bad, but you're
okay.
worse. Or
Okay.
you know, I don't think anyone
Yeah.
wants to be associated with being the worst. I think every side would unanimously agree that Spike Lee was wrong and we're not Chirac.
Yes.
But it's I don't think any different from the Sox versus Cubs debate.
Okay.
Like, if you think about it in terms of that, then I think it's similar. It's like, yeah, no, Team Cubs. Yeah, no, Team Sox, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of that debate. But you know, I think
Right.
I think being a Chicagoan is one of the most amazing and fascinating arguments you can have. I think that even, as I made my trek to Hollywood and been there the past 7.5 years, Chicagoans seem to find each other.
Mhm.
And it's such a beautiful thing. It's fascinating the way you find each other. You're just talking to someone, literally just was talking to a screenwriting instructor and who does this boot camp in California. And we were just talking about his boot camp. And then he said, I said, oh yeah, I'm in Chicago at the moment. And he goes, oh my God, yeah, I used to live there. I used to live in West Rogers Park, which they're renaming now or something. And I'm just like, oh
Mhm.
my God, we always find each other. And it's a beautiful thing because when we do, there's automatically like a bit of favoritism. It's like, oh yeah, this is my tribe. So I just
For
love that
sure.
about
Yeah,
us as Chicagoans. When we are transplanted somewhere else, we still ride for each other. It's great.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And then the micro, what neighborhood are you from or what side of town are you from matters a lot less when you run into somebody, that far away. It's like, you could be from the south side meeting somebody from Schaumburg, but it's still
Yeah.
like, oh, we're from the same, part of the world. Let's connect,
We all have our same stripes, or we've all endured winters, and so we think we're a
Yep.
little bit tougher because we've endured winters. But I do like to quietly tease that, like, yep, we endured those winters by hibernating.
Hmm.
Just like we're so tough. But when you're on the West Coast, it does matter. And then we have the conversations about our blood thinning and how, if we don't go back often, then we are not as tough as we used to be. And it's just
Yeah.
this hilarious
It happens fast.
dialogue. Yeah. But you're right.
Yeah.
We talk about what side of town a little bit, but it matters less. I think we end up talking about when you meet someone again outside of Chicago who lived in or is from Chicago land, it's always the question of what side of town are you from? And then what school did you go to? But it's always a conversation about
Mhm.
high school. I don't care
Hmm.
if you went to grad school, got your doctorate. If they say, what school did you go? It's always about high school. And it's
Okay.
just such
Yeah.
a
Right.
telling thing. It's like, oh, I went to Whitney Young. Oh, I went to CVS. And so it's just a beautiful experience, unless you're not from Chicago and you're stuck on a Zoom or in a meeting with some Chicagoans talking about it. And then you're just super annoyed that we've gone on this diatribe about Chicago and its
Yeah.
geography and just, the fascinating beauty of our neighborhoods and experiences. So, but it's always
Yeah.
beautiful to
For sure.
experience.
Yeah, so this the talking about meeting people abroad that are from Chicago can be a nice little segue into what got you into TV production and that,
Mm.
that kind of art and what, eventually got you out to LA and yeah, just kind of walk me through that whole thing.
Oh, sure, sure. So I actually did go to CVS, and that's a vocational school. Right now, they're actually on the list of, I think it's called the list of Chicago buildings or infrastructures that are in dire need of preservation. So it's a huge building. I think I read in the Crain's article recently, the Crane Chicago Business article, that it usually holds somewhere from 4 to 6,000 students, but right now there's like 800 students enrolled. So the building is at risk of deterioration and it just, from lack of use. So that's kind of painful to hear because it's a beautiful school, it's a vocational school that equipped a lot of people with, with trades and skills like auto mechanics or horticulture. For me, it was food services, hospitality food services.
Mm.
And so I started there and I actually worked in hospitality. I ran hotels for a while. In fact, when I went to Northern Illinois University for undergrad, I worked in hotels to kind of offset my college expenses while pursuing my collegiate career majoring in technology. Um, at the time, technology was super hot. It still is today, but it was like this new thing, and it was this guaranteed, path to success if you pursue technology. So I followed in my aunt and uncle's footsteps. I did pursue technology. I went on to work in technology as a programmer, and then grew and kind of climbed the ladder to become a consultant, basically client facing and getting them to buy into the technology interface that we were selling or that we were providing. But I felt like something was lacking because I was only operating on the left side of my brain. I was only using one side and I'm actually left and right brained. So I
Hmm.
would feed the right side of my brain with things like local stage plays or, being involved in the creative aspects of things at my church,
Hmm.
volunteering for certain things. So just looking for a way to kind of feed myself creatively. And then as I was working in technology, one of the groups, actually the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, which I volunteered, they reached out because a producer from Hollywood wanted volunteers to help as extras for a little bitty film called The Dark Knight, which was shooting in Chicago on LaSalle Street. And so I volunteered and I, showed up in my all black and I was on LaSalle Street watching in my all black, watching Heath Ledger run by me, scary as heck in person,
Oh,
watching.
the flipping the semi truck scene, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
God, to be there is fascinating. Even though they
Wow.
do so many things like in post production,
Yeah.
seeing what they do live was life changing. I got to see famed director Christopher Nolan working with Maggie Gyllenhaal with her amazing outfits. She was just looking, I mean, gorgeous. And I,
Academy Award winner, Christopher
Academy
Nolan.
Award winner Christopher Nolan, exactly. And so just
24 hours old there.
being,
Yeah.
I know, right? So just being in that setting, I often say like I fell in love with Hollywood that day. I
Hmm.
stood there for 12 hours because movies take a long time and you do things over and over and over again, but I did not mind. And after that experience, I did research to find out like how can I learn more about this industry? Up until that point, my only experience with television was figuring out, or TV or movies, was figuring out what we call continuity errors. This is the term, but like if you watch TV or a movie and you see like the person's hair is in the front and then it's in the back and then it's in the
Hmm.
front. So it's like
Yeah.
I would always point out those things. And I never really understood why I was obsessed with that. Obviously, I understand now, it's the producer in me. But that day, I fell in love with film. I started to research how I can be involved in this industry. What is this industry? And so I ended up going to a school that's closed now, but in Chicago. It was called Act One Studios. It was the private school that taught acting because I thought, again, looking at Christopher Nolan with Maggie Gyllenhaal, that's what I'm supposed to do, right? If Heath Ledger can be this creepy and be a real person, like clearly that's my path. Well, I studied it and I realized how vulnerable you have to be an actor. And I was like, yeah, no, no, no. I don't want to have my feelings exposed that much. So maybe there's
Yeah.
another way to be involved. And that's when I came across Columbia College Chicago, which is one of the top film schools. It's right here in the city of Chicago. And they have a beautiful cinema art and science program. I went there as a grad student because I'd already done undergrad in technology. I was an adult, I was working professional. And I enrolled there in, I think, 2012. And through their program, I learned creative producing, which was a great program that allowed me to use a lot of my soft skills and transferable skills from my career as a consultant and programmer in this world of entertainment. So a producer is really just the person that can see the vision for a project, film, TV, whatever it is, and bring all the right people together, make sure that the money is right, raise the money, find, all the right resources, and help kind of chug that process along from concept to completion. That's like the most layman's example of what a producer is, right?
Mhm.
So it wasn't too different from what I was doing in technology as a consultant, except I was doing it in technology for people that were retiring or dying. It was an HR outsourcing. So that was the most exciting thing. And this industry allowed me to do it for, people's imaginations, right? People that, who could come up with a story or a concept and then work together with other people to bring that vision to life and form a project that allows us as consumers to experience escapism or, nostalgia or whatever it is the theme or the intention of the project is. So I
Mhm.
did that with Columbia, learned all that I could about film. Then they have this program called Semester in LA where I went to LA for 8 weeks and immersed myself in California and Hollywood. And at the end of that program, you're meant to decide if you want to uproot your life and give it a shot. And I was willing to do that, but not uproot my life completely. So I negotiated with my company at the time to allow me to work remotely, way before the
Mhm.
whole world was working
Yeah.
remotely,
Unheard of
and
at the time.
unheard of at the time. And because I had such great work ethic and my performance reviews were great, they were willing to take a shot on letting me be 100% remote. And I went to LA as an intern and, set my sights on a company that I thought created content that I, would like to create. That company was called Woodpacker Productions. The Woodpacker's company is known for movies like Girls Trip, Think Like a Man, Think Like Man 2, Little with Marseille Martin, the youngest executive producer in Hollywood to date. And so that's where I wanted to work. And I was willing to go in as an intern. And I again negotiated with my tech company that I would not miss a beat. My only ask was to work remotely and to be able to work with the tech team in the Manila, Philippines, because the Philippines start of the day was Los Angeles's end of the day. So for
Okay. Hmm.
two plus years, about 2 years and 4 months, I worked both jobs. I climbed the ladder from intern to assistant to manager while, supporting my tech team in the Philippines. So I'd be working for Woolpacker from 9 in the morning to 7 at night, then drive to my LA townhouse where I had an amazing roommate who I love and who thought that I was a robot because I didn't sleep.
Yeah.
And I would log on by 9 p.m. and work with the Manila team until I couldn't do it anymore and then rinse and repeat.
Oh.
And that's how I got my real life education in entertainment quickly because I had already, I think, not lost years because I think the time I didn't spend in LA going straight from college or an undergrad program into entertainment, I made up for by having professional experience and a strategic
Hmm.
plan and focus. But that's how I ended up there. It literally started with
And a
me
source of income.
and a
Yeah.
source of
While
income.
while you were launching your other career. So I mean, yeah,
There was no way I was going to let go of that income. I'm like, guys, all I need is a laptop to do technology. I don't need to be in an office. I don't need a team
right.
of people. My team's in another country anyway. Even before the Philippines request, I think my whole team was in Gurgaon, India. So I
Mm,
almost never worked with anyone in the US.
mhm.
So that was what sparked my request to, work remotely. So when it came around for the pandemic and everyone working remotely, I was literally giving people tips and advice on how to be diligent and focused and like never work from your bedroom, never, have a
Mm.
separate. I was like giving all these tips. And I mean, other
Mhm.
people do it now too, but people were freaking out. Like, how could they get their work done at home? And I'm like, yeah, no, you literally, when it's an audio call, you put on your headset and you put a load of laundry on. Like you, you take advantage of
Yeah,
the
right.
benefits. Yeah, it's great.
So by my count, you were sleeping what, like -3 hours a day? I think that's what my math came out to be.
Yeah. I feel like on average, I'd probably be in bed by 3:30 in the morning LA time, so 5:30 Chicago time. And then, yeah, probably back up by, I don't know, 6:37. So I did get some sleep.
Man.
But because, I think something happens when you're not a college student anymore where you actually need sleep.
Yep.
So as I started to get older, I couldn't make that sacrifice anymore. But honestly, it was actually a crutch, if I'm honest. Yes, having the income helped, but it wasn't until I decided, like almost 2.5 years into that career shift, once I decided to like cut the safety net and go all in with, entertainment and trust that I had what it takes to be successful doing that, that's when things really started to take off. So a lot of times I get, mentees or, students from my alma mater who want to know, can they do multiple things? Can they, how they can, kind of straddle the fence between two careers, et cetera, et cetera. And I always tell them, like, you're going to have to sacrifice something. For me, it was sleep and socializing. I was not able to build a lot of the relationships earlier in my entertainment career, which matters so much in this business. So I was a little delayed in that, but fortunately, I love meeting people. I'm very a social butterfly. I really enjoy being in the room, hearing people's stories, conversing about their journey. So I was able to kind of make up that time a little bit. But for a lot of people, it's not that easy, and it's actually they may be introverted or ambiverted, and it's a little more challenging to build those relationships. So I think you have to think about that, especially if it's entertainment. But I do believe that for me, that was a sacrifice. And I tell these mentees that you have to make a sacrifice no matter what it is. And then you're going to have to make a decision. I don't think doing both is sustainable or doing multiple things is sustainable. I think you're going to have a singular focus at some point. And for
Mhm.
me, it took about 2.5 years for me to say, you know what, I'm going to go all in. Yes, I could have done both, but they would have been like success to a certain level doing both. But as I saw for me, once I, cut that safety net, I was able to elevate that much further. And I'd gone from manager to vice president at BET and BET Studios just by focusing on entertainment and letting go of the paycheck that I had then. And it was a great
Mhm.
decision because that meant greater, pay just by,
Right.
focusing on the one thing as opposed to trying to hold on to the what was a great living. Don't get me wrong. I'm not poo-pooing technology. It's a great way to earn a great living. But
Mhm.
once I decided to kind of cut bait, I was able to really achieve kind of greater success. And I'm still on my way. I'm still
Mhm.
growing, learning and improving. But yeah, I'm happy that I decided to just focus on one industry.
Time now for the Real Estate Stats Corner, presented by me, Jake Lyons, real estate advisor here in the Chicago area with App Properties and my website, thechicagohomesource.com. In this segment, I am going to present 3 statistics about the Douglas neighborhood. Even though we're talking about a few different neighborhoods, the current place of residence for my guest is the Douglas neighborhood, so we'll focus on that. The 3 stats that I am focusing on are going to be the median sales price for 2-bed condos, the median sales price for houses of at least 3 bedrooms, which most houses have 3 bedrooms at least anyway, and then the median rental price for a 2-bedroom apartment in the Douglas neighborhood of Chicago. I do this because, though I may be biased, what really is a neighborhood without real estate? So I figure it's a very relevant topic to bring up whenever we're talking about any neighborhood at all. So, with that all being said, The median sales price for a two-bed condo right now, which right now means, May of 2024. So obviously, whenever you listen to this, the numbers are probably different, but this is just a snapshot in time of what people are willing to pay to live in this area. The median price for a two-bed condo in the Douglas neighborhood is let's call it $205,000. The median sales price for a house of at least 3 bedrooms in the Douglas neighborhood is $499,900. So basically right at $500,000. And the median sales price, or the median rental price, I should say, for a two-bed condo, the sales info was provided by InfoSparks, the rental provided by Rentometer, just so you know. The median rent price for a two-bed apartment is $1,700. So there you have it. There's a quick snapshot of residential real estate in Douglas. Obviously, there are a lot more variables to that. If you are interested in having a further conversation about the Douglas neighborhood real estate, please go ahead and reach out if you want to see what's available right now in that area or any area in the Chicagoland region. Go ahead and visit thechicagohomesource.com, and that link will be in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what does that success look like so far? What are some projects that you've done that you're proud of? What has, Toy from Woodlawn gone on to do out there?
I know, that's so funny. Toy from Woodlawn, and I have to share this because my family and I, even though we've all moved on and lived in different places, I even lived in Rogers Park. I had a house in Glenwood, Homewood. I've lived all over. I lived in Wheeling. I worked in Lincolnshire. So like I've been all over the Chicagoland area. But yes, I am Toy from Woodlawn, and my family and I, we always say 6 tray all day. So tray meaning 3, right? So
Mhm.
we, at our core, we are 6 tray all day. So yes, Toy from Woodlawn, 63rd. I have a few projects that I'm really proud of. Um, a few of them to note are Kingdom Business. It's a TV series that is in the second season of it. It did 2 seasons. It's on BET Plus, and it's a beautiful series with a lot of musical talent from the gospel, Christian music, and inspirational music industry. And so it stars Yolanda Adams and Michael Beach and Michael Jai White and a few other notable talent. So I'm really excited about that project. We're fingers crossed that there'll be a third season. That one I'm proud of. Uh, I I also did the very first comedy series on BT Plus called Bigger. It did 2 seasons before it was canceled, but you can still watch it on BT Plus. And that was a project where I really cut my teeth as a producer. So that was fun. And there's a series that's coming up on March 28th on Amazon Prime called The Baxters. It is based on Karen Kingsbury's book series that has been out for many, many years. And so we're excited to bring The Baxters to screen. I did that project in partnership with Will Packer and Roma Downey, who we may remember from Touched by an Angel with Della Reese. So that was a really amazing project to be a part of and to become good friends with Roma. And then I'd say the last one I'll probably mention, because there's too many to name, is a project I've done with Nickelodeon, and it's called That Girl Lele. And so that's airing right now on Nickelodeon. It is one of my favorites because it features 2 young girls of color, but they're both aspirational and yet very different. One of them is like a STEM nerd and very left-brained but still aspirational, because I was a STEM girl and a tech nerd, but I never saw that as a flaw. And so it was very important to have a young female character that was STEM focused, a little bit nerdy, but making that look cool. And then the other character is like this hip hop lyricist, super fashionable character who was actually fashioned after Lele, the actual rapper and hip hop talent, and just bringing her real life character to have a narrative voice and background. And so also aspirational for people who are a little bit more akin to the creative side. So as I've described who I am, left and right brained, you can kind of
Right.
see
Yeah, I was gonna say
why, these 2 girls who
a little bit
represent
of a
left and right
self-portrait
brain.
going
Yeah,
on
yeah.
here. A
Can't take
little bit.
I can't take all the credit, but
Uh-huh.
it's a project that I was really happy. I also did that with Will Packer, but it was mostly something that I worked with creator David A. Arnold to come up with for Nickelodeon, who has since passed. So he's no longer with us, but his work lives on. And I was so, so excited to work with him. I mean, it was literally me, him, and his wife, if you will, kind of coming up with these concepts and kind of figuring them out back in 2020, early pandemic days. And so now to see that on screen, to see the Lele doll and all the paraphernalia and merch available at Target and all of these other stores,
Oh
like
wow.
it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to have come to life. And even to see little girls and kids whose parents may know me or know my name and them, share like, oh, that's Tori. She, worked with Lele. And then to see those kids light up because they love Lele so much. And it's just really
Hmm.
rewarding. So for that reason, that one's my absolute favorite, which is why I mentioned it last.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we'll have links to anything that makes sense to have links for here in the show notes
Great.
for
Thank
anybody who
you.
wants to buy a Lele toy or anything like that. So
Yes. Yes. They make great Christmas and birthday gifts.
I'm positive of
Backpacks,
that.
all of it. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Lunch boxes, water
Mhm.
bottles, maybe something. Yeah.
All of it. All of it. So much fun.
That's
Yes.
awesome.
And
Yeah.
Lele is, she's 17 now in real life. And so I just love her so much, but she's transitioning. It's just like coming of age. So she's transitioning into a young adult, which I'm just like,
Hmm.
oh, my baby, but not even my kid, and I'm claiming her as such, but she's very active on social media. So a lot of
Okay.
kids that go and follow her and they see her as a real life person, I think is a beautiful thing because she's a lot like the character that we created, even though the character conceptually is this, what is it called, affirmation app. So she's like a figure in an affirmation app that the other character uses to try to build up her self esteem. But then she
Mm.
comes to life, and then when she comes to life, she comes outside of the phone, and becomes this real life person, if you will, or being looking to explore what life is like in the real world. So think about growing up.
Okay.
Think about, you remember the show, what was it? Smart. Oh my gosh. I don't know why I'm trying to blank. I talk about this all the time. Small Wonder. You remember Small Wonder?
I'm sorry,
No?
I can't say
Okay.
I do.
That's okay. Somebody in the audience will remember. But
Yeah.
it was inspired by, again, me and then David's creative genius and then a little bit of Small Wonder and obviously, input from Will and the folks in Nickelodeon. But the amalgamation of all of those things from shows past, but how we can make it fresh and new and,
Yep.
relatable right now today. And so we're really proud of that one.
As it sounds like you should be. I need to check it out. I'm sure it's on. I probably find it on like Hulu, maybe something like that.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
it's.
Well, Nickelodeon falls under Paramount Plus, but I'm
Okay. Yeah.
positive that there is a Hulu or an Amazon link because those third-party services
Yeah.
often, they intersect. Yeah,
Right. They
they're
all
like
kind of link into each other, give each other
absolutely.
referral fees or whatever, however that works on the back end. I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh yes, absolutely. Amazon and who, especially Amazon, they will not miss an opportunity to get to the
No.
consumer. So
No.
smart business folks over there.
So you mentioned a little bit already about how some of your personal life has obviously as of course it has seeped into the art that you put out there and that you're involved with. But I guess just how would you say that growing up in the Chicagoland area in general has sort of informed your movements, both in a business sense and the choices that you've made, just as a career and then also from the creative standpoint.
Ooh, that's a great question, Jake. I think growing up in Chicago, I think first and foremost, as a Chicagoan, similarly, like New Yorkers may feel this way, but there's just a toughness, an innate toughness that we have, like a resilience that you just have to have, right? That's associated with
Hmm.
being a Chicagoan. So that's the first thing that I think it has been helpful to me is growing up with that sense of resilience and toughness and not like wearing rejection on your sleeve or letting what other people think affect you at your core. I think that's really helpful in this business because this business, there are more no's than yeses. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing I'd say that's been really helpful growing up that way, kind of built me for this business. The second thing I'd say is specifically growing up in a family with so many people. I think I mentioned there was like 10 of us growing up in a two-story building, 10 grandkids, and then
Hmm.
like 7 kids. I think at the most there's probably 6 of them, the generation above me, plus my grandmother. And her being like the queen, Medea, the Mima, whatever you want to
Right.
call
This
her.
ultimate
And
matriarch of, yeah.
absolutely, like seeing her strength, seeing her command all of us, seeing the respect that she garnered from everyone, and just, and not just in the family, the neighborhood, you know what I mean? Like everybody knew, do not mess with Inez Green and her family, right? So I think that gave me a confidence that I could not have paid for, knowing that that's my ancestor, that's my lineage, that's my bloodline, and that I can command certain respect and my brand can represent a certain, representation. And so that has helped me just in having, again, the confidence when I walk into a room that I belong there, that whatever ideas I have are valuable, that I have something that someone else needs. So I think that's been helpful. I'd also say growing up there, even though my grandmother lost her building, having the experience of being in a home that my family owned, as opposed to growing up renting my whole life, but having
Mhm.
the experience of ownership put that in me that I too can own. It's attainable to own if that's my desire. So that's helped me certainly with my personal life and my portfolio, but even as it pertains to my creative and my business, I can own my own business. I can own multiple businesses that,
Mhm.
again, my ideas are valuable. So I think all of those things started with my upbringing. And I guess one of the last things I'll say is I talked before about how growing up on 63rd and Ellis wasn't necessarily safe or the safest neighborhood to grow up in, but we didn't feel unsafe. But I will say that, but growing up in that neighborhood, a lot of times you'll hear folks say like you're a product of your environment. I don't know if you heard that before. And I guess to a degree, I am a product of my environment because again, I identify with that toughness, that resilience, that confidence, and that entrepreneurial spirit, right? I won't go into
Mhm.
detail there. But all of those things attribute to who I am. But there's also the flip side of that where if you were to ascertain that being a product of your environment had a negative connotation, that I looked at as a challenge to say, well, if that's what you think about my environment, let me change your perspective because that environment I grew up in has now become one of the fastest growing and valuable neighborhoods in Chicago, one
Mhm.
where gentrification is highly sought after, where, the value has increased over years. And so I attribute that to my own character to say, yeah, I could have been considered a lower middle class, the kid growing up in a semi-impoverished neighborhood. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say impoverished because it wasn't the projects. Then again, my grandmother
Mhm.
owned her building, but I'll say lower middle class if that's a thing, or working class. There we go. Um, and so
Yeah.
now I am, according to, some, considered in one of the top earning percentiles for my age group, one of the top earners, right? I'm not a millionaire yet, but
Mhm. You're working on it.
but I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But I am certainly not what anyone who says something like that with negative connotation would expect to come out of Woodlawn. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So would it be safe to say that sort of the seeds that were planted in you at a young age that you could do this, that you could be entrepreneurial, that you were smart, that your ideas mattered, those kinds of things that you were saying earlier, was that more a byproduct of the family you grew up in than the area that you grew up in? Is that safe to say? Or, I don't mean that to be like
Yeah.
a leading question, but
Well,
or, what was sort of like the median expectation of somebody, one of your peers at the time?
Well, you may have, put the caveat about it being leading, but it's actually very factual. I don't
Hmm.
think that, and I guess that's why I was trying to straddle the fence about the statement of being a product of your environment. I think you can look at it one or two ways, but I think the core of my answer is that I was raised in a family that's very entrepreneurial. We
Hmm.
haven't talked about this because we've been really focused on my living in Chicago and my journey, to my career. But my family, to this day, we still have our land in Mississippi.
Oh.
That land is it's something like 80 acres. I always mix it up whether it's 78 or 88. So I'm going to say something like 80 acres of land in Mississippi. And, you know, um, I'm going there later this year just to figure out how I can, I guess I hate the word capitalize, but maximize my portion of the land use down there, right? So
Mhm.
I just recently, like, fall or early, winter 23, learned that my great grandfather purchased that land and thereafter was chased out of Mississippi. And that's how we migrated to Chicago because he was chased out of Mississippi. because of a lie about, and then, again, this is a story I was told, but a lie that he was responsible for the death of a man in Mississippi, a white man. And because at that time, you definitely were going to have an immediate death for such an
Hmm.
accusation, whether truth or not, there was no trial. So
Right.
he had to run, and he ran to Chicago. And that's how we ended up with roots in Chicago. But that entrepreneurial spirit lives in my family's DNA because
Hmm.
my great grandfather saw fit to create an inheritance for generations to come by purchasing sizable land because he had something like 10 or 11 children. So he knew he needed enough land for his children to have a place for his children and children's children. So I think, to your point, it very much has to do with the family that I'm a part of. I think family means a lot to us. In fact, our slogan is that we're family made. Oh. And we all value our family name, which is Green. In fact, the production company I just launched is called Green Goddess Productions. So you see a
Let's
lot
go.
of familial inspiration still continuing years later. And even though my grandfather has passed away and I had the luxury of meeting him while I was very young, he's long gone, but I'm
Hmm.
still living his legacy in the
Yeah.
decisions I make and in the investments I make and in my portfolio and in the businesses I launch. So absolutely, it had a lot to do you know, with my bloodline, with my family.
That's an amazing story. It's a sad story in a lot of ways. White people suck sometimes, especially back then.
I have
Yeah.
family that are white now, so I always tease that, there's a drop of Irish in my blood, so it can't be all that bad. I wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Hey, we got St. Patrick's Day coming up
Yeah,
soon. Come on,
yes,
come
yes.
join. No.
I have the legal right to celebrate.
Yeah, everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day, but
It's
you
so true.
especially. We're actually gonna go to the new Guinness factory this St. Patrick's
Ooh,
Day. It's my first time going to that new one in the West Loop. Pretty excited for it.
yes. Oh, fun.
Um, but no, yeah, not to get too quickly away from that story. Yeah, that's amazing that it lasted, I guess, like it's still there.
Still
Generations later. I mean,
there.
you would have thought that they would have pulled some kind of corrupt stuff and like confiscated it or something.
You would think so. I mean, as a filmmaker and a producer, my plan is the reason I'm traveling down there is not just to see what kind of investment I can do with the land, but I want to go with, a live mic and a camera and a mini crew and create our family documentary. I think a lot of times people lose their history and their heritage, especially Black people. And a lot
Yeah.
of my family has no idea that we even have the land that's available to us, and a lot of my family are here struggling in Chicago, New York, wherever, Detroit, and they don't realize that there's another life choice. And so my hope is that as some of my grand aunts and uncles are still living, that I can capture their stories and, the information and their experiences and put together a family documentary that both, tells my family and even my son and, future generations to come who we are, where we come from, and what we've accomplished, but also that helps them to know, like, this land is here, so don't ever lose it, like,
Hmm.
understand that, it's as simple as paying the taxes every year. In Mississippi, it's not even a significant amount, and that's what has been done. Like, we have a huge family, and that family with those same entrepreneurial kind of gifts has made sure that the taxes are paid every year. Um, no one has cleared out all of it. So it's a lot of forest and trees on most of that land.
Hmm.
But if someone wanted to create a lumber company, have at it.
That's how it
If you
goes.
wanted to
Yeah.
clear a space and put a double wide trailer there to live when it's too cold here, have at it. There's so much opportunity. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of my family may not have the knowledge of that, but I certainly am gaining more knowledge of it. And I think that I have a special kind of opportunity being a filmmaker that I can put it together in a way that's not just a family meeting and kind of talking about logistics, but that really makes it kind of enticing, kind of selling my family on doing something with our land more than what's been done, which is just retaining it. But let's do
Right.
more. Let's try to come up with our own family community if we so desire. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. Go rent it out to some server farms or something. No, yeah, there's so
I
many
know,
things you can do.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. Yeah, I mean, a lot
uh,
of us were shied away from the South because of, thinking it's definitely a slower pace for us city
yeah.
folks. But
Oh
sometimes a
man.
slower pace is really attractive, and
Yeah.
we need it to help kind of process. And, I make a lot of decisions quickly. And sometimes many times I make mistakes that way. So I welcome a slower pace sometimes. And by the way, technology is readily available now. So you can be in the deep South and,
Mhm.
still be able to have connections and do business and do all the things. So,
Yeah, for sure.
we're only an
Yeah.
hour away from Jackson, Mississippi, an hour and a half away from NOLA. So yeah, we'll see.
Mhm.
Sorry, I derailed us now. Now we're not talking Chicago anymore. Forgive me.
Oh,
We're
that's
in,
okay.
I'll
Yeah,
come back.
I can edit stuff later if I feel the need to, but this is all interesting stuff. So you are back in Chicago now, full time.
I'm here in Chicago now. I still go back and forth to LA, but because I am, again, launching my own production company, I wanted to really focus on, the projects and my own writing and, all of the creative things that are important to me. And I find that being home, because Chicago will always be home, is where my creativity lives. And so I'm going to just kind of stay put for a little while and see what I can churn out. But I'm definitely gonna make my way to LA, in the next couple of months too.
Is the production company going to be based here or LA?
It is LA based, but I think nowadays the pandemic was a blessing in disguise, right? So nowadays you can work from anywhere and do business everywhere. So I think it will be an LA based company, but a lot of the projects and stories are they're almost always Chicago focused. There's just such a nuance to characters and this city. I mean, I'm always inviting people to Chicago from LA, especially if they've never been. I'm like summertime shy. There's no better place to be. Yacht
Totally.
parties and the festivals and all. I mean, it's just all the tastes. Like you have to experience it. And so if I can bring that to screen in some way, more than what has been, I'm all about that. So even though it's an LA-based company, I think that's more in service to, my Hollywood folks that may or may not care, probably may care where your company's based, but it's very much going to be Chicago through and through.
Hmm. I
Mhm.
trust you.
Yes. Yeah. There's like a sense of responsibility for Chicagoans to make sure that we're representing Chicago well. Again, that took me back to the Spike Lee comment. I'm just like, really, Spike? We had and this was before I even worked in Hollywood for real, that Chirac came out. But the biggest argument from Chicagoans is like, how can a non-Chicagoan tell a Chicago story? Like, come on.
Yeah.
So that was
A New Yorker at that.
like a New Yorker at that. Like, I can't
Yeah.
come and talk about your boroughs. Like, it's not my
Yeah.
lane.
Hmm.
So I want to make sure we're telling stories that highlight us in a positive light because we've had such an unfair, view from journalists and the news
Yeah.
and media about Chicago. I think at one point we were considered murder capital. That's terrible. Like not murder capital or not Chirac. There's more that goes on than just the teenagers congregating and jumping on cars. And yes, those
Hmm.
things happen, but they happen everywhere. And like I said, it's one of the best places to be in the summertime. It's called the second city for a reason. We didn't even talk about this, but there are no properties like the properties in Chicago. Me and my partner, we drive around the city and we just look at gravstones and we look at,
Hmm.
we call them mini castles. We looked at this
Yeah.
beautiful building where the Chicago Urban League used to take their meetings. And unfortunately, it suffered a fire not too long ago and it runs the risk of further deterioration. But it's such a beautiful building, and I hope that someone finds a way or has enough money to restore it before it's too late. But we just love the architecture of properties in Chicago. It's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why I chose to invest and buy property in Chicago versus LA. One, because it's more affordable, but because, the history, the masonry, the architecture, the beauty that goes into, what makes Chicago, Chicago is
Yeah.
unmatched. It is unmatched. And so I think, that's something that I'm always drawn to. It's something I love to see in story. Anytime there's a movie or a TV show that's set in Chicago, I'm always looking in the background because it's so eye-catching and beautiful. And
Hmm.
so I think that's what I'd love to see highlighted more in TV and movies. And obviously that'll benefit the city. I went with my stepdaughter to River Oaks Mall a couple days ago over the weekend. And it was so sad because there were like no stores hardly. And I just
Hmm.
remember that being like a hot spot, and so just looking at how a lot of the businesses aren't doing well and just like we have to figure out a way to really pour into our city And one
Hmm.
thing I know for sure is that Hollywood and entertainment has a huge influence on society and consumerism. And so if there's
Yeah.
anything I can do for the city of Chicago, it is to create stories and ensure that the spotlight is placed on Chicago in a positive way.
How do you feel like Hollywood or just, movies and TV? Obviously, you had like your Hughes era, like in the 80s where everything was based kind of around, but in the more recent, like The Bear or Shameless or different things like that, all the emergency PD, all those shows and stuff like that. Like
Hmm.
how to the extent that, you pay attention to those shows, I'm sure you
Hmm.
probably do. I personally don't. I haven't seen like a single second of any of them. I did watch a couple episodes of The Bear, but
Okay.
how do you think that the city is being portrayed in those, and how can it be more accurate, or how can it be better, and what do you think about it?
Well, the one thing I'll say is I'm always appreciative of any shows that are set in Chicago
Yeah.
because that means that we're bringing money and focus to Chicago, right?
Hmm.
I love the Dick Wolf shows because they highlight Chicago and the name Chicago in those very formulaic procedurals. So Chicago Med, Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, and they bring
Hmm.
work to Chicago. So yay, Dick Wolf. A lot of
Yep.
those are shot on, I think, stages though, and you don't really get a sense of, I mean, you get a sense of Chicago, but again, it's a procedural. So it's really not about Chicago as I hate to say as a character, but the character or
Oh,
the,
that makes
the
sense.
the highlight
Yeah.
that it brings to the characters.
Hmm.
But they're great shows. And then The Shy, that was Lena Waithe's show. Lena Waithe, I
Shy.
think she's
Yeah.
from Evanston, but she highlights a show in Chicago, which I love. That that show brings to the forefront what our city is. I think another example you mentioned, Shameless, which is done, but hugely successful Showtime series, and they did a beautiful job of highlighting this family and the dysfunctional function of that family in Chicago. Love that show. Would love to see more like it. Would love to see a replacement for it with Showtime. And then The Bear. So The Bear is the most recent one and the one that has gotten some awesome acclaim in recent
Hmm.
history. And I love that show. I don't think that it really reflects Chicago at all,
Yeah.
mostly because it's interiors. It's set inside this restaurant, and there are a few things that bump me, but that's just as a critical creative because I'm like, okay, this is clearly the North Side, but this is not how these kind of restaurants work. And but but but
Hmm.
but again, we're in Chicago. It's that whole like South Side versus West Side versus North Side thing, right? But we're not talking about the internal fight of our communities or which side's the best side or worst side. We're talking about, okay, now we're a city and we're supporting our city as a united front. And that's where I am with those shows is that, The Bear has brought some excitement to Chicago, even though we're not really traversing the city of Chicago in that show yet. It is a setting that excites. But I think there's so much room, and this is, I guess, my takeaway thought. There's so much room for more story. If you remember, for
Yeah.
a very long time, shows were only set in like L.A. or New York. That was it.
Hmm.
That was it. And
Yep.
there were so many shows you didn't even really expect anything else. You knew that if you were on the train, you were in New York. If you were at the beach, you're in LA. And so I'd love to see more of Chicago in that manner, where it's
Hmm.
second nature and you're just like, oh, okay, we're at the lakefront, we're at, North Avenue Beach, we're 31st Street Beach. We are, on, the Green Line. And it becomes such a beautiful experience that consumers who've never traveled, or I should say tourists who never traveled to Chicago, now have a desire to come. There's some of what we enjoy as Chicagoans become more of a national debate or discussion. How do you cut your
Hmm.
pizza? Is it pie slices or squares? It's of course squares. Like, come on.
Definitely
So
squares.
it's definitely squares. Infusing some of those beautiful dynamics into story, which are fun and just it's so exciting. And so, seeing story where, someone's in a car and they're trying to get across the crazy intersection of 79th and Stony Island. Like, what? Like, do I go now? Do I go now? Do I go now? So
Uh-huh.
I think there's just so much opportunity to bring some of that fun, not just nostalgia, but nuance to storytelling in a fresh way. And that highlights the beauty of our city. Again, the festivals, the yacht parties, the lake, the running along LSD, that driving experience, like all of those little things that we quietly enjoy.
Lakeshore Drive. That's Lakeshore Drive for
Oh,
those who don't know.
yeah, that's always a fun joke too. It's like, where are you? Oh,
Uh-huh.
I'm on LSD. What?
Yeah,
Lakeshore Drive.
it never gets old, that one.
Never gets old. So just, being able to share some of that, I think would be great. The way that New York has been able to share their culture and their city
Oh, yeah.
with people who've never been, the way that LA has been able to share it. So there's so much room in that regard. And I think we're gonna get there. The thing that will help us get there is if, the powers that be would allow for more tax incentives. That's
Mhm.
the thing that a lot of people don't know. I think a lot of consumers think that it's up to the creatives to have stories exist in a city. But the fact of the matter is, if it's more expensive to shoot in Chicago, producers would rather shoot in Toronto or
Mhm.
wherever and make it look like Chicago and
Yeah,
come to
Atlanta, whatever.
Chicago, Atlanta, Louisiana, wherever, and then come and get your B-roll, which is just like secondary footage that really you don't have
Yep.
to have your physical characters travel to and really make it look like you're there, as opposed to actually coming to Chicago to capture the footage in Chicago, which allows for more jobs, which allows for, our community to thrive. So we do need those lawmakers to make it more enticing for, creatives and producers and Hollywood types to want to do business in Chicago. That's one of the reasons that folks go to Atlanta and Louisiana and Canada, because of those
Mhm.
tax incentives and kickbacks. So until we really make it worth coming to Chicago to do more projects, producers will always look for the cheaper option, because it's always better to put the money on screen than to give the money
Sure.
to the city. Like if I have to
Obviously.
choose
Yeah.
between making my picture or whatever look good versus actually having it be authentically shot in Chicago, I'm going to choose to make it look good. So
Definitely. And Chicago has not been competitive in that respect.
not really. I mean, there have been some strides to improve that, but just not nearly as competitive as some of the places I've mentioned. Not at all. And as we've seen, Atlanta is really thriving. I think the nickname for Atlanta now is Black Hollywood. So when Tyler Perry went there and
Mhm.
created his stages and studios on like 330 plus acres of land, like it kind of blew the door wide open in terms of other places to produce content, and established Atlanta as the secondary hub. And then Louisiana came in with amazing tax incentives to shoot there. So a lot of folks go to Louisiana, and then obviously Canada. Just there's opportunities. There's always been opportunities to shoot in Canada for less. But again, the production is saving money. The challenges there are now, okay, and nothing against Canadians, of course, they're so nice, but when you shoot a project in Canada, all of your crew will be Canadian crew, more than likely, all of your
Yeah.
extras and background talent. So you're creating jobs for,
Mhm.
the Canadians and the residents of Canada, as opposed to creating jobs here at home. And so if we're talking about making sure that Chicago thrives and that, our city is getting funding and we're helping our deficit here, it's like help me help you. Create
Yeah.
incentives and opportunities to bring productions here, because again, Chicagoans will always champion each other. So, and we have some that are doing it even despite the incentives, like Lena Waithe's Dick Wolf, but there could be so many more opportunities. Even Shonda Rhimes is a Chicagoan. Shonda Rhimes created Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, Grey's Anatomy, the longest running TV
Mm.
show ever now. She created Queen Charlotte and Bridgerton. So she's a Chicagoan.
Wow. Wow.
Give her an incentive to do a show in Chicago.
That is a significant resume you just rattled off, man.
I know. One
Yeah,
amazing Black woman from Chicago.
man, that's awesome.
Southside.
Nice. Yeah, I try not to get too wound up in politics and stuff, but it
Same.
does, the one observation I'll make is it does seem like Chicago never misses an opportunity to show off how short-sighted they can be and the complete inability to see the forest through the trees.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
But I had something else. It
Go
was gonna
ahead.
be good too.
Oh, you forgot it?
Uh,
Okay.
so what was like the
Politics.
last thing?
We were talking about Shonda Rhimes and then her being a Chicagoan, and then you said you don't get too wrapped up in politics.
Oh,
But
yeah, I was gonna make the point too that, yeah, especially given how many what sort of the supply of talent here in Chicago is. What with, it's a huge theater town and Second City, IO, all these things, people who do come here to try to get into these TV shows. I mean, It's like if you're not going to LA or New York, but you want to be in that space, Chicago
Yep.
is the place you come. And a lot of
Yep.
people do. The second city is
Absolutely.
obviously world renowned and all that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be good to bolster the environment for all the people that are trying to make something happen within those kind of creative, spaces.
Yeah. 1,000%. 1,000%. I don't claim to be, extremely politically astute, but I do understand when and where my hands are tied. So I
Hmm.
think that anything that we can do working together to reach the common goal, I think would be helpful. And if it's an
Yeah.
education thing, then fine. Let's talk about how, certain decisions, that are made can inform other opportunities so that we can figure out how to help each other. Because I think at the
Hmm.
end of the day, this is a beautiful city. And, people like to come here for a number of reasons, whether it's to experience the cuisine and scenery of downtown or the lake, or even to drive quickly through the bad neighborhoods and see what it's like. People want to be in Chicago,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I think that Chicago would benefit from more people coming and spending their money, and I think again, TV and movies have huge influence. And so
Oh
anything
yeah.
that can be done to draw, and excite people about visiting, I think that's what you want to do. I mean, I want to say people visit New York and LA because of how many stories have been told in those places.
I mean, how much money do you think Ferris Bueller's Day Off has indirectly made the city of Chicago?
Oh my goodness.
It would be
The
impossible to calculate. I mean, how would you even do it? How would you'd have to go in and get some percentage of people's subconscious, and when they think of Chicago, how much of that was based on seeing Ferris Bueller when they were a kid or whatever, and like that's why they
Oh
want to
my
visit Chicago
gosh.
and spend money here. I mean, you can't know it, but I know it's a
I
lot. It's
know. Oh,
probably
it's
in the billion. It's got to be in the
gotta
billions. I
be.
mean,
It's gotta be. It's
yeah,
gotta be. I think that's a great question. I don't know, like a fun question for your viewers. It's like when you think of Chicago, what movie or TV show comes to mind? Oh, I'd love to see
yeah,
that list. Like, just how many people said Ferris Bueller? Seriously.
a lot. Blues Brothers
Oh yeah,
would
for
be in there
sure.
for like the Gen Xers. That would definitely be their go to.
Oh, now my nerd side is getting excited. Like, I'd love to see the analytical results of that. Like, okay,
Yeah.
let's poll the audience. Chicago, what movie comes to mind? What TV show? Enter your generation or your age group, and then like see
Hmm.
the results of that. Like, oh my gosh! And by the way, that would inform what reboots take place, right? If I wanted to turn that into a producing thing, I'd take
Hmm.
those results and I would look at who owns what title, and then I figure out, okay, which one's worth rebooting, which one's worth remaking, which one is
Yeah.
worth, kind of regurgitating into a brand new story,
Hmm.
and therein you have a new show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
IP, valuable stuff.
I
Yeah, there you go. There's an idea. Go run with
very
it and report the findings back to me because I really want to know. It'd
I'll give
probably
you
be
an
the Dark Knight for
associate.
me. That the Dark Knight would probably
Oh
be
yeah.
my main one because like the Dark Knight
Yeah.
was just a seminal moment for 17-year-old Jake Lyons.
Listen, again,
So
it's the whole reason I ended up in this
yeah,
industry is
I love
me
that.
showing
I love
up,
that so
set
much.
no idea what was going to happen, and me literally, like I said, falling in love. Like people are like, do you remember the first time you fell in love? Yes, on the set of The Dark Knight.
Fell in love with Heath Ledger
Oh
and
yes.
Joker
Oh my
makeup.
gosh. She's just like running by. I'm like, God, this guy is scary.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. Yeah, The Dark Knight for me too. But Ferris Bueller, oh my gosh, there's so many. We could stay here all day talking about movies and TV. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, all those with John Hughes, right? All those.
Yeah.
It's John Hughes, right? That's the right name. Yeah. Yeah,
Sean,
all
yeah.
those.
But then
Yeah.
there's also, oh, okay, now it's about to go off on a tangent. Stop me. I'm done.
All right. All right.
Um, my son's probably like, when is
Um,
mommy coming back? I'm like, sorry, I'm having a great time with
yeah,
Jake.
no, sorry. We've been talking for a while. You're so easy to talk to. We could do this all day.
Thank you.
I will start to bring things to a closing point here. I'll just do a
Okay.
couple more questions just about kind of like the specific area thing. So you're
Okay.
in the Douglas area now, right? So how do you find yourself there, and what do you think into that area?
So I'm in the Douglas area because my partner, his family actually bought their home here. This home was built in the 1880s. They bought this house in the 1990s. And so when we got together, he was already living here. He inherited the property from, his mother when she passed away. and we've been living here with our family for several years now. So I love the area. I love how it's considered, it's the Douglas area, but this neighborhood is particularly labeled the Gap. And so we're in the Gap, and these
Gap between what? Why is it called that?
I actually am not sure. I think it's I think it has to do with what I was about to say about it being like historical landmark. Okay, pause. Let me look it up real quick because now I want to know.
Sure.
Hold on. Let's see. So I can speak about that intelligently. But I know it's called the Gap neighborhood. Oh, there it goes. The Gap, Chicago.
Like
And
between Bronzeville and Hyde Park or something, or I
so
don't know.
it says the Gap. It is. So it literally is labeled the Gap on the map, 60616. People are going to be able to know exactly where I live. And it says, yes, it is between 31st and 35th Street, between King Drive and Michigan. So that is the Gap area. And
Mhm.
so, okay, so let me say that again. So it's called the Gap because of the specific border of this area between 31st and 35th Street, between King Drive and Michigan. And it is an area that has historic landmark status. Um, most of the homes in this area are marked for no tear down, so they can never be torn down, which is kind of unfortunate because there are a lot of homes that are dilapidated, that are
Mhm.
abandoned, and that really need to either be torn down, especially if folks can't afford to renovate them or bring them up, to livable condition. So there are lots of eyesores, but
Back
it's
to that short-sightedness comment from a little earlier. It's like seems
yep.
like a good idea at the time, but yeah.
Exactly. But I also understand, as someone who's been, investing in property and looking at opportunities, that there's a huge demand for like masonry workers, and, like insurance premiums are at an all-time high for these types of homes because in order to get someone to renovate a property like this, it's going to cost an insurance company more than what the value of the
Yeah.
home is. So
Yeah.
so anyway, I know that's a long-winded answer to why it's called the Gap, but there's so much nuance to this specific area. But it's highly sought after. There have been investors and homeowners that have come to this area that have renovated their property and or sold renovated properties, and they value in varying number. Like some of them are 220,000, some are 550,000, some are 750,000, some are a million, and they're all in the same little area. Um, and so I have a developer on our block who has multiple properties in this area. And he shared with me that he was able to acquire a great number of them years ago for like $50,000 each. So he was able to, sit on them for a while, slowly renovate them, and then, rent them or sell them for a huge profit and really build his business. So, for a number of reasons, we desire to stay in this neighborhood, but whether we physically stay here or not, I think it's a property that we will retain just because the area is so valuable and sought after. And again,
Mhm.
the beauty of the architecture, the residential architecture in this community is just, it's awe-inspiring. It's what we enjoy when we go for our walks. It's just we go and we look and we see what people have done, and we try to determine what was original. Was this soreness originally there, or did they put it back, or can they find someone to fix it because it's falling apart? It just informs so many conversations for us who have a real estate nerd
Mhm.
like Gene or whatever it is. But love the area. We have work to do here. Again, 1880s. Lots of original like woodwork. I don't know if you see the trim on the windows behind us, but we have lots of original wood here in our home. The fireplaces are still here, although they're not functioning. But there are a lot of things that we want to do to, kind of bring it up to today. But we have no desire to do like a gut and make it more contemporary. We love a lot of the aesthetics and the
Mhm.
original beauty. Like our stairwell still has a lot of that detailing from the original carpentry that was done. And, it's something that we really value as lovers of vintage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's it like just to what's the lifestyle there like? What are some, the local businesses and restaurants and things to do, and
Yeah,
what
what's
are the people
funny
like?
is so we have a lot of like different cultures and ethnicities in our neighborhood. And we love that diversity. We especially love it when folks decorate their houses for all the different holidays. So we got out for Halloween and for Christmas. And even now there's some folks with decorations for Easter, Resurrection, or Passover. So we love that there's so much diversity in our neighborhoods. In terms of business, I think that's where there can be improvement. Again, going back to our conversation about Chicago in general. Um, there are a lot of businesses. There are a lot of businesses at King Drive. There are a lot of businesses at 35th Street. But what we've noticed is that there's like a shift that happens at 35th Street. So,
Mhm.
34.99 and down, decreasing number. There seems to be a little bit more of a, oh, I don't want to be offensive here, but I'll just say a sophistication and
Mhm.
a calmness or a peace that seems to
Mhm.
exist. And then when you get to 35th Street, it's just a lot busier, more bustling, experience. You still have, lots of, hawking and, street guys hanging out. There's a liquor store, so you have a lot of that activity that's going on.
Just
It
the
may be
telltale signs that you probably shouldn't linger here very long.
correct, correct. So,
Yeah.
it's funny, me and that developer neighbor that I mentioned, we often talk about how when he tells people to come and look at properties, he'll tell them to take 31st Street and then come up. Meanwhile, I take 35th Street all the time. I don't want to be blinded. I need to know what's going on, in the
Yeah.
neighborhood. So, but that's where a lot of the businesses are. You even have like the more innocent, gosh, what is the term? Is it loitering? The more innocent loitering, where there's like, older men in their, 60s, 70s, or 80s, and they just come and they grab their coffee from McDonald's and they hang out on the bench right there just to people watch. So
Right.
it's busier. It doesn't necessarily mean dangerous. It's just
Mhm.
it's a hangout. So you have a lot of that going on. There's, several restaurants. There's local cleaners. There's I think a high school not too far away. The police station is even right there. There's, on the other end, we're not too far from IIT, so you have a lot of students in the community. And then on the other side, there's DuSable, yeah, high school. So, and then the big park. I mean, it's a really nice community. And then even on 31st Street, there's a little bit more, I guess, upper echelon daycare. And I say that because they are expensive. I have a 3-year-old,
Mhm.
almost three. And I'm like, I can't afford you. And even if I could,
Mhm.
I can't afford you. So it's a great community. And I love to see it doing well. I think it can do better. And even at on the other side of King Drive, you have your Jewel Osco, you have your
Mhm.
Walgreens, all of these different stores. So everything you need, I think, is within walking distance. So it's a very
I was
walkable
gonna ask I was gonna
community.
ask about the grocery situation. I know that can be a
Mhm.
sticking point in a lot of areas, unfortunately, especially on the South
For
side. A lot of,
sure.
food deserts and whatnot.
Yeah, because I love being as close to the lake as possible. We're not very far from 31st Street Beach, which has been a very thriving, hangout every summer. But then as you go further south, there are still beautiful, buildings and residences for investment further south, like even all the way up to South Shore. But to your
Yep.
point, businesses dwindle the further south you go. I think there's probably always going to be liquor stores and laundromats. But, I think the last grocery store I think that existed over east, if you will, because that's what we call it. There's no east side. It's just over east.
Mhm.
Um, that was Dominic's on like 71st and Jeffrey. And that was
Mhm.
years ago when they shut down.
Mhm.
But I feel like that's the last grocery store chain, like big chain that exists until you get all the way to Indiana over east, where it's like Walmart or something when you first cross over to Indiana. So other
Man,
than that, it's
that's
just
a
like
long way.
a
That's a lot of
long
miles.
way. I mean, you can come a little bit west to, like, Stony Island, and there's a Jewel somewhere, like, 75th and Stony Island, I think, but that's it. So you literally have near me, and I don't know any other groceries, like, there's no Whole Foods, there's no oh, wait, there is a Mariano's by me, but again, there's Jewel, then there's Mariano's, and then I wanna say there's, like, nothing
Yeah.
until, like, there's, like, nothing.
There was that Whole Foods in Inglewood for a little while, and then Amazon bought Whole Foods, and they're just like, "Yeah, this is a cute little idea. You're trying to do Whole Foods, but no, we're not doing
Yeah.
this anymore.
I remember
We're
reading an
not doing this
article.
anymore."
I think I read an article about that, and it said, like, the neighborhood was in an uproar about them closing down that Whole Foods and taking it from the community. But then the article also mentioned that, and I can dig this up if you want to put a link in there. The article also
Mhm.
mentioned that the residents of the neighborhood were stealing from the Whole
Yeah,
Foods, so it couldn't thrive. It couldn't make money.
exactly. Right.
So, if you're going to support the businesses, great. If you're not, you can't complain about them not being there. And I
Yeah,
think that's what
it's tough.
makes it challenging for the mom and pop shops, right? Like, I grew up where I remember my first job, and when I lived in Jeffrey Manor, I was making cash under the table, but not that much. IRS, don't come looking for me. And it was a store called Prime Foods.
Not even the $600 threshold, not even
Not
enough to,
even, not even.
yeah.
I was 13 years old. It was probably $20 a week for like 6 weeks.
We're
It was not,
I think we're past the statute of limitations on that. I think you're
I
good.
think so. But it was a store called Prime Foods, and it was where I think right now there's a Dollar Tree there on 95th and Jeffrey. But it was Prime Foods, and it was owned by this family. And that was when like you didn't even scan groceries. You stepped on a pedal to make the belt run, and then you typed in like 159 grocery, 139 drink, and that was my
Mm.
first job. And, that taught me a whole lot too. But that was when mom and pop shops were, thriving. And when, you could get, farm to table and, local farming and grocery was just the thing. And so now, I mean, everybody's getting things delivered, myself included. I take advantage of an Instacart situation.
Myself included. What's the word? What am I trying to say? Sorry, I can't do words right now. I held off on the Instacart thing for a while. I even through the whole pandemic, really didn't do it. And then actually this last year, finally downloaded it. And it was just like, oh yeah, I'm not going back. This is just way too nice.
Yeah.
But I mean, I
I'm a
guess
fan.
do you find, I mean, I don't know to what extent you're talking to everybody in every neighborhood, but some of these neighborhoods that are food deserts, like what we've been talking about, I would imagine that Instacart helps.
Oh,
I
for
mean,
sure.
yeah,
I
they
think
might still be so far away that it still causes logistics issues and things like that, but I mean, at least it's more doable.
Yeah, I think it helps. I mean, I don't pretend to know how affordable Instacart and Amazon food delivery is for folks that live in those areas. But I would
Yeah,
think that, I feel like Instacart's something like right now, $9.99 for the membership. And obviously you're paying
yeah,
a premium for what you're having delivered because someone else is doing the shopping and the legwork. But in a
a
world
little
where it's,
bit, but
yeah,
those fees really aren't that big. It's like $6, but you're saving like two
correct.
and a half hours of your life. So,
Exactly. So in a world where you can put
yeah.
in overtime at the job by staying longer because you don't have to leave to go
Hmm.
shopping for 2 hours, it kind
Yeah.
of comes out in the wash, right? So I would hope that folks are thinking about it that way, and you're actually incentivizing me to consider property in that area for that reason right now,
Mm,
because I'm always thinking about what would it be like for my tenants,
yeah.
trying to get up, get off of work on the bus, stop at a grocery store along the way, hauling their groceries, and then have to walk up 3 flights of stairs, so just what is that process like? And I've always shied away from it because, that just doesn't sound easy to me, a woman of convenience. I'm always
Right.
just like, okay, what's the easiest way I can get to, X, Y, and Z, or maximize the hours that I have available. So, but people have lived there for many, many years, and there are a
Yep.
lot of property companies, and I think that area I always see. Gosh, now I'm drawing a blank on the name of the company, that not Pangea, that's another one, but over east, I think it's a M. I can't think of the name of the company now. Jeez, but there are a
Management
lot of
company.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a management company that has a lot of property over there, and so anyway, the point being that they have found great success by, renting in that community despite,
Hmm.
it being kind of a wasteland. But, for me, who's
Yeah.
a smaller entity, I just can't take the risk, I
Maybe
think it's
offer your
expensive.
tenants like a year's subscription to Instacart Plus or whatever it is.
That's good, Jake. That is good. I may have to borrow that. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite an incentive. Yeah, to Instacart, to the nearest laundry if there's no,
Hmm.
laundry on site, because that's another
Yeah,
thing. I
that's
think the
interesting.
convenience of laundry is something that a lot of tenants are interested in, because a lot of
Of
properties now,
course.
especially those that have been renovated, they offer in-unit laundry.
Yeah.
which caused me to kind of shy away from my desire to create a laundromat. That was my big thing. I was like, oh man, these areas always need a laundromat. But now so many people are looking for in unit or, at least community laundry at the property, which is something
Yeah.
that I've invested in making sure that I have. So, especially in Chicago when it's
Mhm.
30 below zero or, 4 inches of snow outside, nobody wants to haul their laundry to a laundromat.
Way. I
Yeah.
mean, it does seem like there's always a place for a laundromat, though. I mean, up here, I live in Albany
Mm,
Park, and I mean, there's a few laundromats near me that I walk by or drive by or whatever, and I mean, there's always people in there.
yeah.
You know,
Sometimes it's better for me too. Like if I just want to kind of have a sink free day, I'll just take my laundry and go to a laundromat and make a day of it. It always
Hmm.
seems to be better to kind of knock it out. But I mean, I guess that's probably more of what I did when I was in LA because before I had in unit in LA, because there's
Yeah.
nothing that beats the convenience of just dropping a load in between Zoom meetings.
I think let's go ahead and summarize this in one sort of capper of a question here. So this overall bottom line in summary, why do you think somebody should want to A, move to Chicago at all versus any other city that they could move to? And B, if they do move to Chicago, why would they want to move to any of the neighborhoods that we talked about? I mean, we can, Douglas is where you are now, but, we can talk Woodlawn, we can talk any of the places that we've, gone over.
I mean, I haven't lived everywhere. But I've been to, in terms of the US, I've been to, New York. I've been to the East Coast quite a bit, been here in the Midwest quite a bit, and I've been to the West Coast quite a bit. And then a little bit in the South. And the one thing I'll say about living in Chicago that's attractive to folks that might be kind of thinking about it or on the fence about it is that Chicago has amazing people, people that are tough but warm and, supportive and inviting and know how to have a good time. You will never be bored with Chicagoans around. I'd also say the food. I don't think there is any other place in the US that is a match for Chicago's food. And, the melting pot that exists here, you're going to get food from almost every culture around the world.
Hmm.
So if you never travel the world, you can come to Chicago and taste what the world's foods taste like. I think
Truly.
that's an advantage in being here. I think even that sense of community, the people, like you have people from all over here in Chicago. I know Little Italy is not what it used to be, but when you go to that neighborhood, you're going to experience a little bit of Tuscany, a little bit, and it's just a beautiful exploration of what another country could be like because those that have migrated here have set up a little bit of home here in Chicago in a beautiful way. Same with Chinatown and
Hmm.
other neighborhoods. So I think
Yeah.
that the
Argyle. Yeah,
people,
there's a few like that.
absolutely. I think the people and the food, but lastly, I'd say the scenery, the atmosphere. I think that if you are big on your environment, Chicago boasts with things that are inspiring and beautiful and, from the architecture of the buildings to, just the history of Chicago, the museums, all of, all of those experiences that make up this beautiful city, they dwell here. So I think those are my top 3 reasons to consider moving to Chicago. You can argue affordability, but I think that that just is so specific to each individual and their
Yeah.
finances. So
So
I would
relative.
it is, it's truly relative. And so I think that you can find a place in Chicago no matter your budget. I'll say that. But I do think top of the list reasons would be the people, the food, and, the architecture, the scenery that is Chicago. And then I'll say for the neighborhoods that I talked about, especially like Woodlawn now, I think again, I grew up in Woodlawn, and so I had an appreciation for the Midway Plaisance and rolling down that hill and, and walking to the lake and experiencing the festivals in the park and, all of those beautiful things that still happen now today. So I think that that area is very much, or even more kid friendly, family friendly. I think that again, scenery, it's a beautiful neighborhood to be in. I think with things like, the Obama Library coming and a lot of the sports and the events that are coming to Chicago, it's just a great South Central area to be in. I think the Gap is probably more for, probably a little more affluent, family or buyers, but not so much interested in being downtown or so close to downtown, which I think is great for folks who maybe don't drive or need to be downtown for work, probably less family focused. I mean, you can have a family and be down there, but when are you going to go to Millennium Park every day?
Mhm.
So, I think as you come a little bit south, it's a little bit more family friendly, a little bit more space. You have, the street parking, your garage parking. Those are things that I think are really beneficial. And that's what my family is. We have kids, so we need to have space, but we also like the proximity to the lake, to downtown, to the suburbs, to the freeway. I mean, expressway. Sorry, that's LA talk freeway, the expressway. So I would say, that's a big plus for, those South Side neighborhoods. And then I didn't talk about this earlier, but Rogers Park, where I lived, I think that's also very close to the lake. It's great for, folks that want to, again, be close to downtown. It's probably better for, again, either young couples or students or people that are transitioning into adulthood, because you got to be willing to move your car.
Oh yeah,
Parking's a headache on the north side, but
especially Rogers Park. It's so dense,
it's so
and
dense.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, for
yeah,
sure. But if you get a place high enough, you get some great views without the huge
yep.
price tag of, like a Wicker Park or, Lincoln Park or whatever. So those are some of my favorite Chicago neighborhoods. And I think, again, the further south you go, the more economically friendly it is. Chicago is still a very segregated city in some regards. So just know that the further south you go, you're going to hang out with more beautiful Black Americans. The more, north you go, you're going to have a little bit more diversity, probably the least Black Americans, but we're still up there. I think, and then you have pockets of communities like we've talked about before with Chinatown and Little Italy
Hmm.
and, even, Cicero, which is predominantly Latinx. So I think
Hmm.
you're going to get whatever it is you're looking for, you will find it in Chicago.
Well said. All right. Yeah, you should definitely go into TV or something. You're good at this.
Ah, thank you, Jay. I just got to work on my eye contact. I'm always like all off in the sky or whatever when I'm talking. I
Well, with
never am like,
Zoom,
just, guess I don't want to see
yeah,
myself. I'm like looking at myself.
and I'm always looking at you. So I actually had like a tab covering myself on this
Oh, I
for
should
most
have
of it
done that. I
because
should have like hid myself somehow. That would have been, because I'm always looking around because I'm like, I'm not trying to see
yeah,
me. But yeah.
yeah. Well, because I mean, what are you gonna do on Zoom? You're not gonna look right into the camera lens the whole
No,
time. That
that's
would just
weird.
feel
Like
insane,
looking at
So
a dot. Yeah. So no, I'm
yeah,
just
no,
like,
you got to look at either yourself or the person you're talking to is way better
right.
than doing that. But
And so I just did a hide self view, and that would have been perfect because it would have been me looking at you only the whole time. Whereas before, it was like looking at you, but then noticing like, oh, my hair is weird. Oh, my, whatever. Oh, my background. Let me fix my light. Let me change it.
oh,
So it's better
just
if I'm,
maybe more fidgety.
yeah. So I'm like, let me hide self view next time so that I can just be focused on, who I'm talking to. That's a really good
Well,
note now for
next
next time.
time, next time you do a podcast over Zoom, you'll know what to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. This is
Anything else that you would want to promote or talk about or highlight or anything
mm,
like that? We went over some of it earlier, but
what else? What else? What else? No, but you got to
or
invite
maybe
me
recap
back
the things we talked about earlier.
when I launch my next thing. No, I guess I could just share like where people can find me if they're interested in
Hmm.
following stuff that I have going on. Maybe I can do that.
That's great. Yeah,
Okay.
please.
I'm always working on, different things, new things. I'm always focused on, mentoring opportunities for those that are in my industry that have very specific questions or focus. So for that, I invite people to stay connected with me via LinkedIn, especially if it's professional. I'm just Toy Monique on LinkedIn. And then I do a lot of promotion for projects that I'm working on Instagram, Toy Monique on Instagram as well. Those are, I think, the two best places to find out either what I got going on or just to kind of follow what's going on with me or reach out with questions or interest. But yeah, I think, the biggest thing is check out That Girl Lele on Nickelodeon and King
Yeah.
in Business on BET Plus. And yeah, I think, and by the way, you can also see That Girl Lele on Netflix. So we have a second window viewing
Oh,
on
cool.
Netflix, along with a few other projects like The Real Husbands of Hollywood and First Wives Club. But that's about it.
That's huge. All right. Thank you so much, Toy. Thank you so much for coming on here. I know that our audience is going to get a ton out of this. It's a pleasure
Good.
knowing you. It's an honor to have you on.
Yes.
And yeah, Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jake. Take care.